Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, a couple of franchise movies hit the big screen, Horrible Bosses 2 and Penguins of Madagascar, plus an Oscar hopeful, The Theory of Everything. We'll also review The Signal in our home media moment, and in our triple feature of older films, Silver Linings Playbook, Justin's pick for old classic Ink, and one of the most well-known Oscar winners, Annie Hall. Our series looking at the first half of this decade continues with our top 5 animated films from 2010 on up. Before we get started on the new releases, gentlemen, I just want to touch on a couple of the big trailers that have been rolling out. We have, of course, the Star Wars The Force Awakens, which is over a year away, and Jurassic World, which will be coming out next summer. What do you guys think about the way these are rolling out, how the trailer now is almost an event unto itself? Also the fact that they seem to be quite early. Not so much for Jurassic, but Star Wars, over a year ahead.
I think that there has been kind of a history of it, but obviously franchises are kind of the way to go now. So if you have a trailer and people are excited for it, it's a good way to really obviously hype up the movie. I think for Jurassic Park or the next movie, I think there is enough of a legacy there that people could get excited. And like you said, I think less than a year away for a big summer movie advertisement, it's not bad. Star Wars, I will admit, being about a year and a half away, almost almost a full year away. I think that it is perhaps a little premature, but then again, it is Star Wars, so maybe there's just enough of a big fan base to get people excited for that. Personally, I think would have been smarter to show a little less than they did in the trailer.
Okay.
Because I actually thought that for a teaser, it was actually pretty detailed. I mean, I've seen teasers that have told me pretty much nothing. Literally, maybe some audio clips, the title, and then the general time it's going to come out, and that's enough to get people talking. So I actually felt like they kind of let a little too much show this time.
Okay.
I think it's better to build up the mystery for it.
Justin, what do you think?
I think it's a big testament to the evolution of fandoms as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, huge cult followings. I feel with Star Wars you almost have to show more because for about a decade, probably even more, I think, we had nothing, and then all of a sudden, whoa, Star Wars is back. Abrams is on board. Things are happening. The script is getting written. We know there's footage being filmed that we haven't seen a frame. I feel like you need to give people that. I mean, honestly, there are theories already all over the place about it. Do I think it's a little bit early? Maybe. But, I mean, we now know it's here, it's happening, and it'll be a huge deal next December. My biggest issue is it seems more movies are doing this for no reason when they have no following. The one that comes to mind is last year they did a trailer for About Last Night a year in advance for essentially no reason.
Well, okay. I have a couple points. I'll speak to the About Last Night one first. Kevin Hart does have a huge following, and it ran before urban movies made sense to me as far as that's concerned. But with the Star Wars thing, I mean, it does have that huge fan base built in, so why do they need to show so much?
They don't.
But Justin's point was that they...
Well,
it was good to see... I mean, listen, I'll be honest, you guys know me. I haven't seen either of these trailers yet, because I'm not interested in that. I hate being ruined on movies. So I don't know what they showed and what they didn't, but Joe, you were saying that it seemed to show a lot.
Well, I think for a teaser trailer, it showed a pretty decent amount. Not like the whole movie or anything, but it actually showed real scenes, and I was like, oh,
I guess I feel like, Justin, if it has so much of that built-in fan base, just give them that crumb. They will be clamoring all over it.
That's how I would do it.
I'm sorry, I don't approve of the Pixar route. It's one of the... it's one of the things that truly infuriates me about their marketing.
In all honesty, I understand what you're saying, but there are a couple exceptions to the rule. This is Star Wars. You could give them crap. They're still going to go see it because it's Star Wars. It's an epically huge fan base. It's one of the biggest.
I'm not denying you, Joe. I'm just saying, don't bite the hand that feeds. Don't beat them back with a stick. Just give them something that they can go off with. They put together a really good teaser trailer. I think there's a lot to go with that. It doesn't spoil anything. It gets you excited. I'm sure it's going to be an epic running time anyway, so the fact that they showed 2 minutes isn't really going to do anything.
No, I mean, I agree. I think it was a good teaser trailer, but I do feel like they gave us a little too much for the first one. You know how it is typically you get the first teaser trailer? It really is a tease. Like, I think it was Dark Knight Rises. It was just looking at the skyline. And that was enough, and people were really excited.
Yeah, a year ahead, I don't think we need necessarily an 88-second trailer.
Then the second trailer is more like the first trailer. So why did you feel like they jumped the gun a little bit? I think they could have waited a little longer, like a couple months. Wouldn't have hurt anything.
When you mention Pixar, are you referring specifically to Inside Out or just in general?
I think I'm excited.
Basically, their entire marketing campaign: Inside Out, Bug's Life, Toy Story. I mean, their teaser trailers are, honestly, if they were not Pixar, I would pretty much be willing to bet that their movies would have bombed.
But to be fair, though, that's the point. They're going off the fact they're Pixar. This trailer didn't really give away anything, but
no, I mean, it was more or less vignettes in a way.
Yeah, it's just random vignettes, but I still felt like it was a little too much.
I mean, I'm sorry, but if they were going to like just show a 15-second clip of an X-wing, I would have been livid.
Spoilers
for the amount of time that they've devoted to this,
Justin,
you owe them more. I'm sorry, but it's true.
I'm going to tell you something right now. I think that they will give them more. It's called the movie.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm sorry if that's your quote unquote tease.
Justin,
no,
I'll tell you right now, they could have left everything out of that trailer for me. And I think most fans, just to see the Millennium Falcon again. Spoilers for the trailer, people. That was amazing. If they had just shown that, I was like, yes, it's back. It looks great. I would have been fine with that. And really, that's like kind of one of the flagships right there. So that alone was epic. Just like the dun dun dun, dun, with the theme coming back. That was the best part with the classic logo coming up. That's enough to get people excited for Star Wars. That's all you need for the first teaser. Heck, I wouldn't show anything, honestly.
Yeah, a year ahead of time, you don't need to really even show scenes.
And one thing,
show the ship.
We might be spending a little too much time on this, but I do want to make one counterpoint, though, Justin. I think that's one thing that's interesting to look at it. Remember Godzilla? Godzilla didn't say anything, till a couple months before the movie, practically?
First trailer showed a little bit. I mean, not a whole lot.
We were talking about it in the period up to that. Godzilla was kept under wraps, and that's what they used to build it up. And people got excited. And Godzilla, pretty big fan base, so as you and I know. So I thought that was a clever way of doing it. That's different than the way they're doing it these days, just as a good offering example.
Honestly, though, about the same length teaser-wise. I mean, yes, I'll give you that they were incredibly discreet about actually showing him, but
still, the timing was...
It was 4 or 5 months ahead of time versus 12 and a half months ahead of time.
I'd say that's pretty confident.
Well, if you want to count leak, then it probably was a year, actually. But
I'm not counting the leak. I'm counting when the studio released it. Enough said about that. Let's move on to our first of the new releases, and that is Horrible Bosses 2. And Joe's going to tell us about it.
All right. Well, Horrible Bosses 2 is a comedy film directed by Sean Anders and stars most of the cast members from the previous film. Jason Bateman, Charlie Day, and Jason Sudeikis return as Nick, Dale, and Kurt. The three decide to go into business for themselves with a specialized showerhead called the Shower Buddy. And by the way, guys, I might have missed in the movie. Can you explain to me what it even does? Isn't it just like a regular shower? What does it do?
You basically put it on, you're connected to the shower line, and like a car wash, it disperses the appropriate things on a timed schedule. So a minute into your shower, it releases soap. 2 minutes in, it releases shampoo, etc.
Listeners, this comedy.
Okay.
Just
telling you what it does.
Well, thank you, because you did a better job explaining it than the movie did. They're soon approached by Bert and Rex Hansen, played by Christoph Waltz and Chris Pine, who wish to invest in their product. After taking out a loan to start production, the Hansens back out of the deal, leaving the three in massive debt. Naturally, this brings back old habits, as the gang decides to kidnap Rex in order to obtain a massive ransom. Turns out Rex wants in on the scam, and hijinks ensue. I think this is another example of a film made perhaps exclusively, maybe too exclusively, to hardcore fans, much like the recent Dumb and Dumber sequel or the Hangover sequels. This film is really far too close to the original film in terms of plot and humor, reusing many of the same elements from the previous story, even if they're not really necessary at all. Insert Jennifer Aniston here. Now, it isn't to say that these scenes aren't all unfunny. Some of them are really funny, just kind of predictable for the most part. Sadly, the script not only reuses similar scenes from the last movie, but several times within the narrative of its own movie. Thankfully, though, the energy of the cast keeps it from getting too stale. Very funny at times, but mostly a very safe sequel, and I give it a C+.
Yeah, just weeks on this show, I presented the first Horrible Bosses for our old classic. Love that movie. And I was excited when the second one was announced. It clearly didn't need a sequel, but I love the characters, so why not? And I thought the trailers were pretty funny. The movie is not. In fact, it took everything from the first movie that was great and just kind of killed it. Not the chemistry and comic timing between the three leads. You can't take that away with a lousy script or half-hatched concept. And as with pretty much any film he's in, Bateman steals the show with the marvelous deadpan. But two things that made the first movie work, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, were that as crazy as the antics are, there are real-world consequences for all of it. That concept is completely absent here. And that the three bosses go for broke as much as the three main actors in the original. Here, for one thing, nobody is even really a boss, but Waltz is barely even in the film. Pine can't keep up with the main three, and Aniston is just given lousy lines. Also, I really wish R-rated comedy filmmakers would realize that making your audience feel uncomfortable is not the same thing as earning laughs. For me, anyway, it's typically the opposite. Horrible Bosses 2 is a disappointment, to say the least. It's a C- for me. Justin?
The original Horrible Bosses worked for me, at least on the second viewing anyway, because of its fluid narrative, wit, and genuinely relatable concept. While I certainly can't call the sequel a disappointment along the lines of Dumb and Dumber 2, it certainly is an underwhelming and completely unnecessary follow-up. To start, gone is that fluidity I came to love from the original film, and its place is essentially the same scattershot humor director Sean Anders delivered in his script for We're the Millers, that I had the same mixed feelings about. Some of it's funny, I won't deny that, and it's honestly probably the best thing this movie has going for it, but the plot holes start gradually piling up over the course of the film, and by the finale it seems mostly incomprehensible, throwing in characters because, well, they're funny, or at least the movie seems to think they are. Horrible Bosses 2 certainly has its moments, but just isn't as entertaining as the original, and I certainly hope they don't attempt a third, and I give it a C+ as well as Joe.
Yeah, the box office receipts would indicate there will definitely not be a third one.
Thank goodness.
I have to say, though, for somebody that only marginally liked the first one, I'm surprised that this one earns a C+. For me, it's way worse. And I think We're the Millers is a lot better than this. I didn't realize it was the same director for both. But...
No, he wrote the script for We're the Millers.
Oh, okay. Well, that to me was a much better movie than this, and a lot funnier as well.
However, he did direct That's My Boy, if that is of any consolation.
Well,
for me, it certainly isn't. But
that movie was okay. I know you hated it
with a red hot fiery passion.
But just surprised. So you don't think this is that much worse than the original, really?
It's kind of falling into rule of funny territory. It doesn't quite gel as well as the original does. I mean, like you and I both have mentioned, the original flows.
Oh yeah,
the pieces fit. It's a really well put together movie. This one, not so much, but some of the jokes do surprisingly hit. At least for the first two acts. Act 3 goes way too meta, throws everything it can at the screen as much as humanly possible, and just hopes something fits. But honestly, the first 2/3, I was for the most part on board.
See, I didn't think it was all that funny. Like the stuff with Jennifer Aniston at the addicts meeting, that to me was just like, okay, they're trying to go for broke to really make everybody uncomfortable, but there weren't any funny lines in it. I didn't think.
It was more situational, I think. Was
I'd agree with that.
I think it was really mostly the actors kind of keeping it relatively humorous, for the most part. But yeah, I don't think that the jokes were necessarily meant to be super funny themselves, the lines anyway. But I think one reason why the movie didn't work as well this time around is because in the first movie, you could really get behind the characters, like you really understood their suffering because they were pegged in a corner. They were trying their hardest. You could really relate to them. That's a big part of it. You guys both mentioned that. And so you really want to see them get at the antagonists. This time it's kind of understandable, but there isn't really as much of a motivation because, okay, it sort of contradicts the ending of the last movie because the whole point of the previous film was, okay, they can get ahead now because they no longer have the horrible bosses. Right. Now it's like, okay, so we're just going to go into business for ourselves. Why? So there can be a second movie? Seriously, it doesn't really... Because if they just did essentially the same plot completely again and have new horrible bosses, they didn't learn anything from their experiences once again, invalidated.
Or even if that was the case, why not just take the entire concept of horrible bosses and turn it on its head? The three guys essentially become the horrible bosses that they were originally trying to fight against.
You know, I actually heard about that. That might have actually been a good way to do that. I think it might be a little tougher to perform that as a comedy, but definitely a better story idea.
I think that would also, though, sort of negate the end of the first movie.
Don't be horrible.
You know, I mean, one other problem I had was, here's a trailer where They couldn't say everything they wanted to say because, maybe there was a Red Band trailer that did, but some of the line reads and the, how they change the lines sometimes or tweak them for the actual movie, some of the lines in the trailer were a lot funnier, I thought, than what we saw on the screen. And part of that was because I felt like, okay, let's just throw an extra F-bomb into this sentence that didn't need to be there.
I don't know. I think one thing that's really a shame is that I think one of the best things about the promotion, I think I saw it with you, Dan. We saw the trailer. It was basically just them doing the slow dance with the music in the background. That was really funny in the trailer, and then they kept it in the movie. I feel like either that should have been removed or they should have kept it the same because it did not have the same effect in the actual movie.
Yeah.
Same with Kevin Spacey's scene.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. Like he just wasn't. It didn't work. Like, he was fine, of course,
and it was funny in the trailer, I thought.
Yeah, it was funny in the trailer.
So that was another issue I had with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just disappointing overall. But let's take a look at our other franchise film, not quite a sequel, but sort of an offshoot, and that is the Penguins of Madagascar. Arguably the most entertaining characters from DreamWorks' Madagascar series, who also have their own television show. The Penguins get their own origin story and film treatment here. Taking place directly after Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, the Penguins, Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, and the adorable Private, get kidnapped and taken to Venice, where Dr. Octavius Brine, voiced by John Malkovich, planned to turn all zoo penguins into monsters to exact revenge on them for shoving him to the background at all zoos where he lived. The Penguins team up to stop Dr. Brine with a Canadian task force called the North Wind, led by a wolf whose name is Classified, voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. Other than that third installment of Madagascar, I never really much cared for the series, but the Penguins, for me, have always been a bright spot. Much like the Despicable Me spin-off Minions next year, though, I worried if the Penguins could carry their own film. But the previews looked promising, with laughs aplenty. And then I watched the movie and was very disappointed with the end result. I thought pretty much every good joke was used for the trailer. Malkovich did a great job with Dr. Brine, his voice unmistakable, of course, but the character is reminiscent of a dozen other animated villains, and except for Classified, none of the North Wind crew are the least bit memorable. It looked promising, but turns out to be just another blah Madagascar entry, and I give it a C. Justin?
I've never been a Madagascar fan, though I did enjoy the third one, but I do have to say the Penguins did truly manage to steal the show at every turn. Whereas Hollywood spin-offs have worked, in the case of Puss in Boots, or missed horribly, as in the case of the Planes series, Penguins of Madagascar not only proves that they can stand on their own, but they were probably better off without their dance-obsessed source material. To start, the movie allows all four to have something to do, from Skipper's wit, Kowalski's deadpan humor, Rico's off-the-wall nonsense, and Private just trying to move past being adorable. Disney, why aren't you taking notes? Though that's not to say the new faces don't hold their own either. Cumberbatch is right at home as the rival leader, and his team plays off the Penguins with ease. Unfortunately, that still leaves the villain, who's a bit of a mixed bag. The one real noticeable setback of Penguins of Madagascar is that, just like its source material, it tries to leave the comedy on rapid fire, which goes all over the place. At the start, it's hitting all the right marks. Around the midway point, it gets one really good joke, and near the end, it's mostly, let's throw in whatever's left and hope something works. Whether or not it's Malkovich's fault is questionable, but the incessant celebrity puns to pander to adult audiences, something Freebirds tried and failed miserably at, grow tiresome quickly. That aside, Penguins is a more than worthy spin-off that hopefully leads to more wacky adventures with the group, and I give it a B.
Before we go to you, Joe, that is one thing, Justin, that I felt with the adult humor. There's hardly any of it in this movie. Most of the animated movies today at least try to have some sort of baseline for kids, but then there's also like the adult humor too that goes over kids' heads. And here, the only thing they had was the bizarre name checking, of that's what I thought anyway. Joe, let's hear from you.
Well, I actually was okay. I guess I should start by saying that I'm not really a Madagascar fan. I might be actually the least fan. I didn't really like any of the previous movies that much. I thought the third one was okay. But my favorite part was the Penguins. I caught a little bit of their show. They're funny, honestly. They're really good. They're definitely the best characters. They definitely steal the spotlight. And I actually think for the most part it works here. Though, I do have to say, I have to point this out because I do think it's a little suspect. Did you guys notice any correlation between the plot for the villain and Despicable Me 2?
Yeah, a little bit.
That was definitely one of them.
It's like, okay,
Yep.
that's something. So I had to notice that. But I think for the most part, the humor does work in the beginning, and I kind of wish this movie had actually been more of a prequel. I liked the origin story aspect. Like, my favorite part of the movie was the beginning when we learned the origins and kind of seeing. I think, ironically, if the movie had been more focused on the penguins and they had actually built more of the humor around that, that was the funniest part. Maybe you can speak to this too, Justin. But I mean, the little comments about the documentaries. That's an adult joke that might go over kids' heads.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the jokes there in the Arctic or Antarctic.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well,
Exactly
in one of the poles where they were located, that was where the movie was its funniest, I think, and just kind of playing off the whole concept of the penguins being cute. There was a bit of that in the movie, but I think that they had focused more on that, it might have been more interesting. I also felt that while I didn't necessarily dislike the story and how it panned out, with the contrast to the North Wind, I didn't really like them that much. I felt that they were kind of unnecessary.
They weren't necessary.
Like I felt like you could have honestly built a stronger movie with more of a focus on the penguins themselves. I just feel like they weren't bad per se, but you could have done the movie easily without them.
I think they could have done more to bring them out more. Like, the only one that's really seemed to stick out to me was, in fact, Classified.
Yes, actually, I thought the polar bear was decent too. He's the only one I remember. There was
there was the girl that
otter and the owl.
The one penguin had a thing for.
Yeah, that was.
But that was her entire thing.
Yeah.
To be there for eye candy, for the one penguin.
Yeah, but for the most part, I thought the humor worked. I do agree, Justin, that it does kind of go rapid fire and doesn't leave time to let things sink in. And towards the end, it kind of started to lose itself a bit. And yes, the actor puns was. Like, it's kind of funny. I noticed it at first, and I thought, okay, is this a mistake? Or is this going to be a gag? Second time, okay, I guess that's kind of funny. And then they dropped it like 7, 8 more times. I'm like, just stop. Like,
yeah,
it's not.
Please.
You're not even trying to be funny. It's like, I just stop. But honestly, though, I thought the performances were pretty good. There was some great voice acting here. The animation was good. Overall, good story. I'd like to see more Penguins movies. I actually give it a B as well. I thought it was a pretty good time.
I do wish that they either focused on that origin story, because I did love the opening scene.
But the first 5 minutes are the best part.
Or
easily
drop the North Wind entirely.
And I agree, actually, if they had focused more on like an actual origin and progressively built it around them and either give them a lesser part or write them out entirely, I think it could have been a much stronger film. Obviously, it bothered you more than it did us, but I noticed that.
And the other thing is, I guess, to me, if the first 5, 6, 7 minutes is the strongest part of your film, and there's another hour and 20 minutes to wade through, that's a problem. You know?
A lot of good movies, have a high point and go down. Jackie Brown, apparently. No, but really, I honestly thought that the movie was fairly funny for the most part and enjoyable to watch. It was entertaining, but like I said, the original concept that they were focusing around, I think there was definitely a lot more potential there for even greater comedy with more focus on the penguins, who,
definitely.
I mean, I could see a whole movie just with them. That would have been fine. They never got tiring.
Yeah, and that's why it bothered me that the North Wind even existed.
They are a problem.
They can find themselves out of their own predicament.
They could have been. They could have been another movie. I mean, I understood why they were there.
taken on like a mentor role that resulted in them becoming as militaristic as they are.
They could have been like fictional characters that Kowalski or somebody looked up to, and it kind of was a basis. They have, and then more interaction between the penguins, and they could have had basically the same story with the same message with, like I said, minor or little role at all from the North Wind.
Right.
That was actually my biggest issue with the movie. I want more penguins, less North Wind.
Well, and it made me feel like DreamWorks, even though Penguins have their own TV show, didn't have enough faith in them to really give them their own movie.
Which is ironic
because yes, they did, but
North
Wind was in just almost as many scenes.
Yeah, well, I think it's because they're not used to them being, in a film where they aren't in minor characters. So they gave them a lot more to do here, but in the show they're their own characters, and they could fill up full 20 minutes or so easily. So I don't know, but I am surprised you didn't like it that much, Dan. Usually you're the fan of the kids' movies.
Yeah, but they have to be good.
I don't know.
I mean, I thought the preview was hysterical, and then, I didn't really laugh hardly at all. And I didn't laugh at what was in the preview because we've seen it so many times. So it just did not hold my interest very much.
That might be another problem with just movies showing too much, to be honest.
Well, comedy movies showing all of their funniest material in the preview.
It's risky.
If nothing else, yeah. All right, well, up next is The Theory of Everything, and Justin's going to tell us about it.
Long before Stephen Hawking, played by Eddie Redmayne, was a highly regarded physicist, he He was a student at Cambridge University, seeking an answer to the mysteries of the universe. However, when he meets and falls for the deeply religious Jane, played by Felicity Jones, Hawking finds the strength to keep going after being diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease and make even greater contributions to the world of science. Perhaps it's cliche to open my review by using the old quote that behind every great man there is a woman, but in this case I feel like it's appropriate. There are those who absolutely love Hawking's theories and those who loathe him, but needless to say, he's certainly left his mark on the world in good ways and in bad, and is continuing to do so to this day. Although I'm not entirely certain the theory of everything is everything it wanted to be, I have no problem saying it's deserving of being one of the better films of 2014. If nothing else, Redmayne and Jones play their roles with such dedication that it boggles the mind trying to fathom how on earth they could prepare for something like this. Not only do they work on the romantic level, but they also allow it to be abundantly clear just how much they both influenced each other historically and the physical and emotional weight they endured along the way. Unfortunately, some of the imagery during the film to illustrates Hawking's own theoretical mindset goes a bit overboard, sometimes not working as well as it should, but the theory of everything takes a fascinating and personal look inside one of the most influential minds of the 21st century, and I give it an A-.
Joe, what do you think?
I'm not really an expert on Stephen Hawking.
Neither am I, that's okay.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine. I feel like that's what this movie's made for. No, I mean,
Probably.
The movie, it's certainly not for hardcore fans. And I'll get into that in a moment. I think that the story for this movie is good. It definitely has some heart, and I think for the most part it's executed well. Like there really isn't too much about the film that doesn't jive well. I think for the most part, structurally speaking, it works. I think the performances are good. I mean, Redmayne does do a good job. I also did think that I think the makeup artist did well, kind of making him look like he was going through the disease, and he must have lost weight. I always respect that when an actor actually does go a little more physically into the role to make it more convincing. So I got to give him props for that. I think the chemistry between him and Felicity is just really quite good for the most part. I think the biggest problem I have with the movie is that I didn't feel like it focused too much on any particular area that it wanted to really make it really hit me over the head and kind of to give me the real emotional push that it needed to. I felt elements of it, but I felt like overall the plot played a little too safe. Granted, I think it's kind of ironic the movie's called The Theory of Everything when we don't really learn that much about his theory, actually. We also, ironically enough, don't learn that much about the disease. We see some of it, but I feel like they could have gone further there. And ironically, the romance, which is actually the center of the film, I still feel like we didn't get quite enough from. I think that the performances were good, the direction was good, but the script was really lacking a little more detail. Maybe an extra 20 minutes or so in one area, but the movie does not take enough of a focus in any one of these areas to really make me feel like it had a real central focus that really sold me. So it does things well, but I don't think it does anything fantastic with the exception of the performances, and I give it a B.
Well, there is no question for me that Redmayne probably gives us the best performance of the year so far. I still might give the Oscar to Michael Keaton for the sentimental vote, but the physically changing and demanding performance is clearly star-making. I can't say the film on the whole is up to the level of his incredible performance, though. It's definitely good, but as Joe mentioned, it's trying to cover a lot of ground, and it mostly does well, but it's sort of all over the place. Like you said, for example, Hawking's children disappear for like an hour, and they're not grown up yet. All of a sudden they're back. And there's all these montages to speed things up. And I have to say, I know she's getting a lot of accolades, but I didn't think Felicity Jones was that amazing here. I thought their chemistry was good.
Yeah.
It could be that her character was just poorly written. I thought maybe that it was next to Redmayne's great performance. She just pales, but I thought other actors here played very well in scenes with him, so I'm not really sure. It is hard to effectively in 2 hours unspool the tale of such a complex life, and I have to agree with you, Joe. I think they could have been a little more focused in certain areas and let some other areas go, but I thought overall Theory does a good job keeping it together, but it's really Redmayne that keeps the film together. It's a B+ for me, right in between you guys.
Interesting.
Did you guys both mention that you thought Jones gave a strong performance? I seem to be in the minority on this one.
I mean, I wouldn't say it was breathtaking. She did a good job. The most damaging words in the English language, right?
Good job.
She did fine, though. Seriously, like I said, I don't think it was fantastic, but I thought, like you said, the chemistry was really good.
Their chemistry was good,
which is something. That's really, I think, what kept it afloat.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for me, it was more or less not necessarily from the spoken acting side of things, but just more or less of like how she's delivering body language.
How she carried herself?
How she carried herself during the overall situation. I thought that was really, really well done.
I get behind that.
Really conveyed the exact emotional quality of what was going on in this film.
Yeah.
That led me to believe it was a really powerful performance.
I think it got better as the film went on. I'll give you that. As she actually was given something to do, and okay, she's becoming more exacerbated with his condition, and dealing with it. But certainly for the first hour, I didn't really get much of a sense of her character at all.
You know, one thing that did kind of bug me that you touched on, Dan, was the sense of time in the film was not particularly good, which maybe was, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I get it. Well, it seems like once he actually gets fully taken over by the disease, years go by, maybe decades, and they don't age him at all.
No.
So it really was hard to tell. Nobody ages.
Right, and because we didn't see the children...
It's a little bit thanks to makeup, but...
Not that little. Noticeable. Like, I think that... the film starts in 63, and I think it ends... presumably in the 80s, or maybe early 90s.
Think so, yeah.
They had PowerPoints, so, 95 maybe. And it seems like he really didn't age for like 30 years, and maybe that's the way it is. But I'm just saying that bugged me a little bit, so I was a little confused about that. I do wish that they had a little more of a focus. Even if they focused on the romance, I think that is what the movie's trying to focus on at its crux, but I don't think they show the evolution of her character quite that well, because I know what they're going for. I do see that, and there are elements of it that do work, but on the whole, she has this transformation, which I thought was, while understandable in real life, I don't know how well it was always sold in each scene. With how maybe that's also because of the time. Like I thought, okay, I could understand why it's getting hard now. Okay, it's been 5 years. Wait, or has it only been 2 months?
Has it been?
Like, am I supposed to sympathize with her, or is she kind of going back on her word a little bit? So that might have been a problem for me too. And like I said, that's a script thing, that's an editing thing, but it did play a pretty important component, I think.
I think, for me at least, the first probably half an hour or so is a little rushed, I'll give you that. They meet, and then all of a sudden, Lou Gehrig's disease starts kicking in.
That was annoying, yeah.
Couldn't we have a couple more scenes to sort of ease into this instead of, oh, wait, now he magically has the disease?
Oh, but they did. Every scene, he tripped or he dropped something. It was I get it.
By the way,
his body's deteriorating.
I don't know how. Maybe this is great research or something. One thing that bugged me, which I thought was borderline offensive, is long before he supposedly has the disease, they have him kind of acting like he's got the signature Hawking look, where his face is a little crooked. He seems like he's already paralyzed. I'm pretty sure he wasn't like that in the beginning, before he was taken. So I thought that was a little much. Like, come on, guys, can he stand up straight at some point? That bugged me. I thought that was a little on the nose. You know what I mean? Come on, you guys were blown away by his performance.
Oh, I thought it was fantastic.
I was definitely on board.
Yeah,
I thought it was okay.
Really?
It was okay. It was a good performance.
I mean, I've seen a lot of good performances this year, so it's really hard to say if it's the best.
I've seen performances that were better than this year.
I'd say it's absolutely up there.
I don't know. It's hard for me to judge because, like I said, I think he definitely put a lot of effort into the role, but I don't think that in terms of some of the characters, and that's also the script too. I think that in terms of dynamics, I think Gleason or Keaton or I think some people played some pretty well.
I think they had better scripts to work with. You're right.
Maybe that showcases the acting more. I think Redmayne definitely has potential. It's the best performance I've ever seen him give.
Well, that's true.
But to think that it's give him an Oscar for it, I don't know about that.
I think he'll definitely be up for it, and I could see the Academy giving it to him just because he's the new kid on the block.
As opposed to
love that.
DiCaprio again.
Well, his stock will certainly go up after this film.
Easily.
I don't
know. I just think he could win, but I think it's Oscar sentimentality from the Academy when there are certainly better films and performances out there, and I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. All right, well, up next we're going to look at The Signal in our home media moment, and Joe's going to talk about it.
The Signal is a science fiction thriller directed by William Eubank and written by Carla Eubank, who I'm assuming is either uncle or father or brother.
I thought brother.
Brother makes the most sense, but who knows?
That was just my guess.
I mean, that would make the most sense. But could be his cousin. We don't know.
Could be.
But anyway, they're doing their thing. It stars Lawrence Fishburne and Brenton Thwaites. It follows 3 MIT students, Jonah, Nick, and Haley, on the road to California tracking a mysterious hacker named Nomad. Any Star Trek fans out there, Nomad's awesome. Upon tracking his signal to an abandoned house in Nevada, get it? It's the signal. After a strange encounter, Nick, played by Thwaites, awakens in a strange underground facility, separated from his friends. He's then interrogated by a possible government scientist/agent, played by Lawrence Fishburne, who explains that they encountered an extraterrestrial entity and that may have affected their biology. Nick and the others attempt to escape the facility as their bodies begin to change, giving them newfound abilities. This is one of the movies that leaves me very conflicted. There are some seeds of a great film in here. The film mostly utilizes editing, music, and cinematography to build a really creepy atmosphere. The performances are good as well, both from Fishburne and the younger cast members. Sadly, the positives end there, as the film really doesn't establish its characters well enough to get us to really care about them. Well, I think we're supposed to identify with Nick for his illness, which he has muscular dystrophy in the film. He comes off as rather unlikable or just kind of bland at first. Haley and Jonah have even less recognizable character attributes. This does improve slightly, but mostly due to the performances, if anything else. Sadly, the film doesn't really give us much in terms of a narrative, really because it's just covering some of the very basic sci-fi plot points. I mean, it's basically science fiction, alien abduction 101. This leaves the mystery nature of the film only interesting for about 20 minutes or so, leading to a finale with little tension and a kind of obvious twist. A good mystery needs some hints. This one just doesn't provide any because it doesn't have much to hide, and I give it a C-.
Justin, what do you think of The Signal?
Some of the best movies reviewed on the show keep their concepts clear, but their execution unique and intricate. The Signal, from start to finish, never seems to have a firm grasp on what exact story it's trying to tell or how they want to tell it. At the start, it seems like a semi-character study in the midst of an apocalyptic setting, then a government conspiracy story, and then a full-on sci-fi thriller with over-the-top action. Each of these has potential, and honestly, after Ouija, I've come to the conclusion that it's fun to see Lin Shaye show up in anything, if only for a few minutes. But they get bogged down by weak performances from the lead and a series of twists I'm sure were meant to come across as shocking, but mostly feel forced. Admittedly, the action near the end is, for the most part, well done, but once the story reaches its conclusion, it feels as if there are even more questions remaining than answers, and not in a good way. For its decent visuals on a budget, mildly compelling story, and up-to-par performance from Fishburne, I leave The Signal with a C+.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Justin, you sort of hit on it at the end there. This is another example of a movie that leaves the audience with more questions than it answers. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but each viewer will have to decide for themselves if it's worth diving into a film like this that doesn't tie everything up so tidily. You do have to pay attention because at the beginning it kind of is going in a lot of different directions. It isn't really until we meet Fishburne's character that it starts to show focus. I do like what director Eubank did with the look of the space, making sure the audience is taking note of the story and not being distracted by intricate set pieces. That may be more of an indicator of a limited budget, but in any event, I thought it worked for the film.
$4 million. Pretty
yeah, yeah. I mean, for a movie like this, I think so. Fishburne, of course, is great. And I thought the Waits delivered a pretty good performance. We saw him recently in The Giver. The Signal may be a little over its head in its concept, but I think it works a little bit better than a lot of artsy sci-fi films. Mr. Nobody comes to mind. And I actually go a little bit higher than that even and give it a B-.
Oh, wow.
You're not wrong, though, Joe. I mean, it's all pretty basic sci-fi. I mean, you're the sci-fi expert.
Look,
I'm more of a novice, so maybe it caught me a little bit different.
Don't get me wrong. If it were my personal preference, everything that took place in the lab is like an A+ for me.
Right. That's the most exciting part.
I loved that.
And that's
part.
when it starts to get interesting.
That was the best story. Mm-hmm. I mean, the kind of character stuff at the beginning was a little slow, but could have potentially been interesting, perhaps if it had gone into a completely different movie, not a sci-fi abduction one. Once they left the lab, it did kind of become a different movie. Kind of reminded me a bit of Looper or District 9, kind of that sort of element. Mm-hmm. Also not terribly bad, but I just wish that it had picked one story to go with, being a little more condensed. I think that the thrills were really good, and I thought that the atmosphere was great, and Fishburne was awesome in this. Mm-hmm. I really liked his character.
Best performance I've seen of him in a while.
And really, the mystery is really mostly from the performances and how they deliver it. The plot, the three plots are so basic and underdeveloped, and I mean, there's no real mystery because, like I said, it's really easy to figure out, and the only mystery there would be combining these three kind of stories that are just kind of lumped separately as opposed to intertwining. So the twist is more like it's kind of good in an awesomely bad way.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, I'm not going to say I didn't dig it, but I was like, I was kind of bored by the third part of the movie, so I was like, all right, well, cool.
Yeah, once it becomes more action oriented, it does get a little bit
tiresome
more out there. Yeah,
I mean, I mean, there were elements of that I liked too, but I don't know. Like I said, I really only liked the second act of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, so that's probably why. But I am surprised you guys both liked it more than I did. I was expecting much harsher reviews. So
honestly, if it wasn't for Act 3 deciding to get a bit more interesting and actually add in some degree of tension, it probably would have been like a C or C minus.
So you didn't think there was any tension in the lab? I find that interesting. You thought there was?
I thought it kind of got repetitive. It's like, oh, he's going to try and break out. Oh, they're going to catch him. Oh, there's going to be some weird.
Oh no, that's the best part of the movie.
That's interesting because once they started getting the abilities and once they got out the lab, I kind of felt that's where it got a little repetitive because it looked like they quite literally had nowhere to go. So it's interesting. The point is you got about 3 half movies in one.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And I think if they had picked one of them, it would have been fine.
I think we can all agree that the first part of the movie, the first story, was the worst.
Well,
yeah,
sort of useless to the rest of it.
That's the biggest problem because, like I said, you could have saved that 20 minutes and maybe skipped ahead a little
Right.
or maybe use a flashback or something. I don't know. But I know what they're trying to do, set up their characters. But one, they don't really set up their characters. And two, the one or two little things they give us kind of make our main character seem pitiful or just kind of an a-hole to his girlfriend.
To me, it might have been more interesting to have it start in the lab and then tell that first part of the story in flashbacks. You know, it started off with the mystery of what's going on, who's this dude, who's the other dude, why is he in this lab?
Could have worked.
You know, and then go back that way rather than have that 20 minutes of nothing build up.
I don't think it has to necessarily be dropped off, but they could have cut some of that because
Easily.
literally like 5 minutes of just like slow pans in the dark hotel room with them vaguely talking about MIT.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our new releases. Let's move now into our top 5 as we are approaching the end of 2014 and the first 5 years of this decade. We've been going back the last few weeks over different genres and in honor of the Penguins of Madagascar. This week we're doing our top 5 animated films from the last 5 years. And Justin, we'll start with you.
Number 5, straight from this year, The Wind Rises. Not Miyazaki's best, but far from his worst. Dramatic change of pace from the magical stories he's used to, but I feel like it still is a really beautiful celebration of a lifetime of making influential and inspirational movies, and honestly, credit where credit's rightfully due. Number 4, I think you both will appreciate this. Wreck-It Ralph. I have my gripes.
Wow.
I'm not going to deny that. But probably the closest thing this generation will ever have to something resembling Who Framed Roger Rabbit, in terms of just all these different people coming together on a project. Very clever story, and apparently a sequel is being scripted right now, so hopefully we can look forward to the mythology being taken to the next level. No pun intended. Number 3 is Frozen. Despite Enchanted being the first one to turn the "we met one day and married the next" mindset on its head, brilliant new direction for Disney films. The fan craze, I'll be honest, has certainly worn out its welcome, but with music this unforgettable, I can't really fault them either. Number 2 is the Lego Movie. Great fun, and honestly love the animation. Not entirely sure how they pulled off the cast, but uses every single one to their fullest potential, and despite the ironic nature of everything is awesome being sort of a hit afterwards, still has a great message of taking something seen a dozen times over and doing something new with it.
All right, well, my top 5 animated starts with an honorable mention, and that is Tangled. Always one of my favorites. Frozen is good. I still prefer Tangled, I have to say. Right? Yeah. And we're not alone in that. Certainly the young kids love the Frozen, but not anybody, because obviously Justin's not a Tangled fan, but most people of maybe 25 or older
Kind of like Tangled.
I think like Tangled more. Let It Go notwithstanding, obviously.
Yeah.
Great song. But my number 5 starts with Wreck-It Ralph. Another great example of the recent Disney Renaissance. And really the only one actually that made my top 5 that is Disney proper. We talked about this at length on the show. I love the world it created. I love the characters and a lot of the sentimentality as well. Number 4 for me is the Lego Movie. By leaps and bounds, the best animated film of this year. It was just very, very creative in its execution. Certainly made a voice star out of Chris Pratt before Guardians of the Galaxy made a huge box office star out of him. My number 3 is Monsters University. Did not know how this one would work. Here's an example of a trailer that I thought made the movie look really stupid. as most Pixar trailers do. I'm with you there, Justin. I don't think that, Up didn't look good, WALL-E didn't look good, and they turned out to all be great movies. But I really, really loved how this turned out. And again, Pixar hitting those right sentimental notes as well. My number 2 is How to Train Your Dragon. Another one we've talked about a few times in various top 5 lists. Certainly the best 3D top 5 that we did comes to mind. Just breathtaking in its cinematography. Something that people don't necessarily think about when they think of animated films is, how they create the world and how the cinematography comes together. Joe, let's hear from your list of 5 through 2.
I have to say that this list is probably one of the hardest I've had to do. There were a lot of really good movies here that I really wanted to get on this list, but unfortunately I'm only going to limit myself to one honorable mention. I was thinking about Tangled, though. I really was.
Nice.
So my honorable mention is going to be Megamind. Really kind of an underrated movie. Really does take an interesting look at the whole superhero genre, and really more than most comics really do. And I think it's really one of my favorite Will Ferrell performances. Fun story, I like the message. So that's my one honorable mention. No surprise here. My number 5 is also the Lego Movie. Really, really awesome concept here. I really loved it. I was so convinced this wasn't stop motion, right?
Nope.
No, see, but they sure made it look like it.
I mean, it's so impressive. Like, I don't know what that is, but just to use the computer animation to mimic that was just awesome. I was convinced. I mean, it was just really fun story. A lot of good references, a lot of comedy, but I think some really, really important stuff, some heavy stuff, I think even profound for adults, especially towards the end there. Got a little trippy. So, pretty bold for a kid's movie. Number 4, I'm surprised I haven't heard yet. It's The Adventures of Tintin. I mean, just
thought about it.
Purely for animation standards. My goodness. I mean, what a fantastic adventure, quite literally. I mean, great story. Really some great Hoskins.
Yeah.
I mean, just really awesome. I think it's incredibly underrated, and I hope you guys told me they were coming out with a new one eventually, right?
Yeah, it's in the works.
Yeah.
And that'll
did very well overseas.
Hopefully we'll get it. Number 3, Dan will like me for this. I think it's Monsters University.
Oh, nice.
I mean, as I have said before, I really wasn't a huge fan of the first movie. Maybe it's been a long time since I've seen it. Just wasn't my favorite Pixar, so wasn't really excited. I really liked it. I think it's one of the best Pixars. Really enjoyable. Just a really fun look at college life and just beautiful animation. Great characters. I mean, really, Billy Crystal and John Goodman. You don't get too many great pairs like that. You really don't. Just they're back in their step, and we love it more. Number 2 is How to Train Your Dragon. The first one, obviously, just breathtaking and visually. Really, I think it kind of continued to bring dragons further into the mainstream for people again.
That is true.
People just coming on the dragon hype. Just really, there's nothing much to say about it. It's just a great movie, great kids movie, great family movie. Really, I wish the second one would have been as good, but I'm sure we'll see more that can possibly reach that particular state.
Yeah, I hope so. Justin, how about your number 1?
Toy Story 3. Perfect end to a beloved franchise. Takes everything that has made Toy Story great over the past decades and brings it all together for one solid conclusion. Though apparently it's not the end, but Toy Story 4 has a lot to live up to.
Well, my number 1 is also Toy Story 3. For the longest time, I had 2 Toy Story movies on my top 25 of all time. And I made my most recent list maybe just a year or 2 after Toy Story 3 came out. I mean, it's the greatest trilogy, I think, of all time. It pains me that it will no longer be a trilogy. And especially since they keep making these TV specials, too.
Halloween.
Which there was just one on recently on ABC for Christmas or something. But I don't know why they have to tarnish the film series with a 4th movie.
It's called
just keep doing the shorts, keep doing the... I know, it's money.
Yep,
Money, money, money. Well... Tom Hanks and Tim Allen should say no, and then they have no movie. But nobody's going to see Toy Story 4 without them.
They love doing it so much.
I know. Who wouldn't? This was just one of the most heart-wrenching animated films of all time, and I think will continue to be for a long time. Joe?
Easily.
3 in a row?
Well, it's kind of funny. Actually, working on this list, it really is probably the hardest list. One of the hardest lists I've had to do, mostly because I had so many options to choose from. However, the easiest spot was number 1, which was Toy Story 3. I didn't even think about it. I just saw Toy Story 3 on the list, and I was like, well, that's obviously number 1, because, my goodness. say it took the life right out of me. No, but really just, oh, wow. I mean, great movie. My favorite, actually, just took the whole story in a whole new direction once again, but kept it fresh after such a long time after the second movie. And great performances from everybody. Really awesome. And like you said, it kind of really pushed the limits, I think, of what family films can do for kids, at least that we've seen in a while. So, yeah, great movie. No question. Best movie of the last 5 years for sure.
Yeah.
For the animated sequel.
Yeah, I don't like to put things up on a pedestal after just one or two viewings. So it takes me a little while. But I do have to say Toy Story 3 is probably my favorite now.
I've only seen
of the three.
Like twice. And I still remember, like, yeah, that's, like I said, I just looking at this list, I'm like, well, that's number one. Like, that's no question.
All right, well, good list all around. We'll have another one next week for the half-decade mark here. But next we have our triple feature of older films, and I'm going to start that off with our new classic, Silver Linings Playbook. David O. Russell took a truly, in my opinion, mediocre book and turned it into easily one of the best films of the past few years. He wrote the adapted screenplay and directs an all-star cast. Bradley Cooper plays Pat Salatano Jr., who has bipolar disorder and has just been released from a psychiatric hospital to move back in with his parents, played by Robert De Niro and Jackie Weaver. Pat is desperate to win back his estranged wife when, through friends, he meets Tiffany Maxwell, a recent widow played by Jennifer Lawrence, who has plenty of her own problems but offers to help Pat get back his wife if he enters a dance contest with her. Chris Tucker and Julia Stiles co-star. I honestly could say a lot of the same things I said for Russell's American Hustle, a film that also stars Cooper and Lawrence, which we've reviewed now twice for this show. The man knows how to get the absolute best from his actors and does it brilliantly here. De Niro gives easily his greatest performance in a decade, and Weaver's put upon people-pleasing mother says more with a nuanced look than most actors can with pages of dialogue. And that's to say nothing of Cooper and Lawrence in her Oscar-winning role, who attach themselves to these characters and have great chemistry. It works as a drama, a comedy, and a romance, many times changing within the three within the same scene, and it is easily an A+. Justin, let's go to you next.
If ever there was a director to ironically bring the love story between two emotionally unstable people to life, it would have to go to David O. Russell. While his stints in his other projects, may we never forget I Heard Huckabees, or director decking Three Kings, his own son has bipolar disorder and OCD, so clearly this is a personal project. That may come across as mean, but I am addressing this matter with the utmost sincerity, because with that personal attachment, he never lets Cooper or Lawrence come across in the film like a freak show and the audience merely spectators. Instead, he paints his characters as flawed, but with different shades of optimism that help them get what they really need. The two have chemistry in abundance, and it comes out in ways that feel authentic without ever feeling the need to thrust them into one awkward circumstance after another. Sometimes the comedy is a bit unsettling, particularly when it devolves into drama on several occasions, but I feel like that's what makes it such a compelling film. It's understanding of these matters and knowing how to handle them. Admittedly, I do have some gripes, such as one editing choice near the start of the film that all three of us thought was a little odd, but it still remains one of the best love stories I've seen in contemporary filmmaking, and I give it an A+ as well.
Joe, how about for you?
Well, I don't know. Silver Linings Playbook has been an interesting journey for me because it's kind of another example of a film with a lot of hype, and I have to confess the first time I saw it, I don't think I quite understood it. I think I was looking at it from the wrong perspective. A second viewing did help me. I really was able to look at these characters and see them as actually being portrayed as flawed, and I actually noticing that they actually did have legitimate psychological disorders. They're struggling, and the fact that they're interacting and still have a compelling romance, I think that's something I maybe didn't quite get as much on the first viewing. Maybe I was looking at it from a more contemporary romance, and I think that's the problem. This movie is not a contemporary romance. I think it goes beyond that. I think it can't simply be categorized as a romance film. It is a drama. It is a comedy. And I think that it really excels at being a very realistic story and keeping things grounded and having a fairly fluid narrative. And I think the performances here are very good. I think Jennifer Lawrence does a great job. Bradley Cooper is fantastic. And I do agree. De Niro really does shine. I mean, he's not really the center of the movie, but every scene he's in, he really kind of steals the show almost.
Yeah.
Like he is quite excellent, playing a very different character. I think it's good to actually show that he can do other characters other than just cops and gangsters. So he can play a normal guy.
What are you talking about, Joe?
Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. But no, it's always good to know he has some more range than I think people give him credit. Kind of break free from that. I think the movie functions very well. I'm not sure if it's necessarily quite as monumental as some people make it out to be, but I think it is important that it does go beyond the boundaries of the simple meet cute romance with all the same stereotypes and tells a real legitimate story that is believable. And I'm going to go a little lower than you guys, but I will leave it with an A.
Okay. And, you guys made an interesting point when we were watching it about the Chris Tucker character.
That's actually, honestly...
So let's talk about that for a second.
If I had to be honest, as much as I like Chris Tucker, and I don't really like him that much, but yeah. I think he can he can be entertaining. I mean, I love The Fifth Element, so I have to kind of like Chris Tucker a little bit. I'm sort of obligated to. But I don't really mind him in this movie, performance-wise. But I feel like the character is pretty much useless. And he is kind of inserted there. And that fade, I know you're talking about, early in the movie. And pretty much every scene he comes in, something about it's very distracting, doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the movie. It is actually one reason why I probably don't leave it an A+, because something about it is kind of off. I don't know what it is.
But Justin, you gave the movie an A+ with your reservations on Tucker's existence being in the film.
Or lack thereof.
In that one scene, for sure. So, how do you feel about that?
It falls very much into I don't think he adds anything. I don't think he takes anything away either. Could I have lived without him? Probably, but I don't hold the movie against him actually being in the film.
Okay.
It didn't bother me in this one as much as it did in The Fighter, where pretty much his entire family is a walking Greek chorus.
I mean, I don't really think it's like the worst thing ever. Obviously, it's not that bad. He works okay.
I don't think he takes anything away from the story. The only thing I can think that sort of gives his character a quote-unquote purpose, I guess, is that he is sort of the stepping stone between, like it was Bradley Cooper's only friend in the psychiatric hospital, and I sort of...
But that's my problem
think that he helps him get better.
But that's the thing. We don't really see that.
We don't know that.
This is all speculation. And don't get me wrong.
Well, clearly they're good friends, though.
I get that.
And that's where they met.
And
so
I'm
you have to assume they at least
I'm not saying
bonded.
there needs to be a whole subplot with Chris Tucker. But hey, maybe that would have been good.
Give him some sort of reasoning to be there.
Like I'd like it if they did a parallel. Like I thought that there was some tension there. Like, okay, mother's having a hard time dealing with her son's having this problem. Chris Tucker is an obvious sign of that.
Right.
And you can tell there's a resolution by the end of the movie. Like there's a little subplot between Chris Tucker and the mom. It's there. But we just need. Can we have like one or two more scenes? I'm serious. Like I'm not. I'm not knocking it.
Make the movie as long as you want. That's fine by me.
I'm not. I'm just saying. Like I feel like there was potential for a good storyline there. I feel like it's supposed to be important. Maybe it's bigger in the book. I don't know. But I just feel like
that book.
I'm just saying. I feel like something was off. Like you could have either taken it out or just expanded. I hate it when movies float on things like that. Just like they put it in there to kind of segue scenes. Like when he goes there and visits them dancing. He didn't need to go. Like they could have had that scene without him. They really could have, and it's just like give him a little more than just to say, "Hey,
I'm here."
White people can't dance. Like it's funny, but it doesn't really need to be there.
Yeah, no. You're right. He doesn't. One of maybe a flaw in the film.
It's the only real flaw I can think of, and I will be honest. It's not like I can really say that it's a movie that I necessarily love, but I can't really find any flaws with it.
Okay.
Really. I mean, other than the minor Chris Tucker thing, it's a pretty well-made movie.
I do love it.
It's very good, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, up next is our old classic. Justin brought us that, and that is Ink.
When the world goes to sleep, people are visited by one of two supernatural beings. Storytellers, who give humans pleasant dreams, or incubi, who give nightmares and corrupt. However, when a drifter named Ink kidnaps a young girl in the midst of these excursions in a journey to become numb, it's up to the storytellers and their sarcastic pathfinder Jacob to find a way to bring her back. I have a bit of a weakness for wanting to throw movies I consider underrated, or at least underappreciated in the public eye, into the mix for OCT, and Ink seemed like the perfect one to wrap up my choices for Season 2. According to the sources I found, Ink had no backing from major distributors, a fact that still floors me to this day, and survived primarily thanks to the one component most distributors loathe: torrent sites. I'm glad because not only does it manage to tell an incredibly vivid and emotionally gripping story, but accomplished it on such a micro budget that really shows off how impressive director Jamin Winans can throw together his film. While his entry for this year, The Frame, is unfortunately not quite as good, but here he's thrown together a film that's original, intelligent, and continually holds up on repeat viewings. My sole issue with Ink that keeps it from greatness, however, comes from its acting. Granted, I'm not calling into question how much we all laughed at Jeremy Make as Jacob. The others come across as amateurish at best. Notably, Christopher Soren Kelly as John, the father of the young girl whose story runs parallel with the central one. It doesn't ruin the film, but it does keep it from being an A or an A+, and instead gets an A-.
Joe, what do you think of Ink?
I knew about Ink. Yeah, I actually saw this, I guess, after the hype. I found it on Netflix, and this movie is right up my alley. I just think it's got a lot of great style. I really admire the fact that it was done, very independently, very underground, and I think that it really does say a lot for a director to take on a project with a story this complex, really with virtually nothing. And really, I just think it's still visually amazingly impressive. I love the world. I love the editing. I love some of the cinematography they used to kind of bring it alive. And it really does have this ambitious story. I kind of joked it has more layers than Inception, which is actually kind of accurate.
It's pretty, yeah.
And I really like the whole concept of dreams kind of intertwining with the afterlife. I think it's a really interesting philosophy. I love the Incubi. I think they're some of the scariest things ever, honestly. And I kind of have to disagree with you, Justin. I don't think the acting was horrible. I mean, considering they're basically amateurs, I think it was actually pretty decent. I thought the main father was actually pretty good. I was pretty compelled with some of his anger issues, but
in some spots it's good, in other spots he goes a little too far.
In all honesty, though, there are some minor issues. Though I think that it's quite obvious that the writer of the film knows very little about how the corporate world works. I mean, it was pretty much every cliche in the book, but then again, it's a dream, so I can let it go. That storyline was, it was pretty good, but I felt it could have used a little tweaking there. I also feel like the film probably could have defined its world a little bit better. I think that it does take a while to get going. The only real major gripe I have with it, though, is that to give Ink, the character, an excuse to actually go on his journey, they have to make it a little longer, so he has to make some stops along the way to meet certain people. I feel like this probably could have been done once and illustrated the point well with what they were trying to say, but they do it again, and that kind of eats away a little time. There's about a 5-10 minute point in the movie where I just feel like it's getting a little repetitive. Thankfully, it doesn't stay there that long.
No.
I think overall it tells a very powerful story. It's incredibly unique, really underrated film. I do really enjoy this one. I'm glad you brought it up, Justin. I actually leave it with an A- as well.
Yeah, Ink, you guys said it. It's a very ambitious, high-concept film, and it usually does work. I do think it's the kind of film that requires a second or maybe even a third view to really understand all of it. So with that said, I'm not sure all of it sunk in for me upon my first watch, but it doesn't help that the movie has several different plot lines it introduces up front. In those first 10-15 minutes, there's a lot going on.
4 or 5 maybe.
Yeah, so it is a little bit hard to keep track of. I do think the director's trying a little too hard to be edgy in some of the scenes with his directing and just kind of let the story speak for itself sometimes, so the audience doesn't lose focus. But I liked, the main couple of plots. Some of the concepts are really cool. I love the Incubi. Very, very cool. And if nothing else, it is another reminder that you don't need a big budget to tell a big story. For me, I give Ink a B on my first view, but I definitely would like to watch it again.
Immerse yourself?
Yeah, kind of immerse myself in the world and
I'm glad you liked
all
it.
That stuff. I did. It was very interesting.
I wasn't sure about it, honestly. It was. I know it's not exactly up your alley most of the time.
I gotta ask though. I first introduced Ink to the show when I mentioned it as my number one for movies I thought would make real interesting TV shows. Obviously, you're the big TV guy of the group. Where do you stand on that?
It's interesting because you sort of mentioned that as a side note as we were watching it. And I had forgotten that you said that. So I was kind of thinking, the more the movie went on about that. I think it could definitely work. But I think it would be better served as, one of those quote-unquote limited series on, an HBO or Showtime. Where it's not a miniseries exactly, but like a True Detective where it's there's, 12 episodes. Or American Horror Story, or something like that.
Condensed.
Where, it's like a condensed show. Because I don't know...
It could go the route of Supernatural
I don't know that it's going on for 200 episodes.
Well, no.
But I do think it certainly has an interesting enough concept that you could easily turn it into a show that would be pretty cool. Because it is an interesting world.
I have to agree. I think that there's potential for a storyline. I actually noticed that there are actually some basic tropes that are very common in a lot of like fantasy anime, and I swear somebody that worked on this film really likes anime because the structure and some of the characterizations, the archetypes are very traditional action anime. So I just thought that was an interesting component that I think it does kind of speak. There are some definitely noticeable elements of Japanese animation in this film,
right?
And I find that very interesting. Just in I think Japanese film and storytelling, it's definitely here. So it's good to see that the slight meldings there.
Interesting. I'm sort of between you on the acting. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was great. But I agree with Joe. I mean, these aren't name actors, They're sort of, probably a lot of them, maybe friends of the director, or whatever.
Like people you don't have to pay to be in your movie.
I could sort of give it a little bit of a pass for that. But you're right, Justin. I mean, it's not great.
It's nobody here is Ben Kingsley, but to be fair, this is probably the first, if not one of the few, real major acting gigs most of these actors
I would say, probably.
So, really, their chops are probably based on stage plays they did in school.
So I was okay with it. I'll put it this way: it didn't stand out to me as like, oh, these guys are terrible.
You could tell they were into it. They were having fun. They were doing the best they could. I think.
Oh no, I'm not saying that they didn't. I just think they weren't that great either.
No, I don't think any of the actors were great. I just think that they did well enough.
I feel like Kelly went way too far with John sometimes. I feel like the director needed to figure out how to control his actors sometimes better.
Possible.
But I mean,
to be honest, I feel like with the exception of a couple, I felt like there wasn't as much acting from some characters I would have liked to have seen. Honestly,
true.
some of them were a little more limited. So
yeah, that's true. Well, with this much going on and this many plots, some people are bound to get
missed,
dropped by the wayside. All right. Well, up next is Annie Hall to close our show, and that's for our Oscar A to Z. We're running through these. It was a 1977 film nominated for 5 Oscars. It won 4 of them, all biggies: Best Picture, Best Director for Woody Allen, Best Actress for Diane Keaton, and Best Original Screenplay as well. And Allen even got nominated for Best Actor. Joe, tell us about Annie Hall.
Annie Hall is a 1977 romantic comedy written and directed by Woody Allen. The story follows a neurotic comedian named Arlie Singer, played by Woody Allen, who's basically himself, as he analyzes how his relationship failed with Annie Hall, a ditzy photographer and singer, played by Diane Keaton. The film is mostly told in flashbacks, with Arlie often breaking the fourth wall. The film examines many ideas through the contrasting personalities of Arlie and Annie. Many of these are seen in conversations and contain many staples of Allen's career. These include anything from existential philosophy and psychoanalysis to the role of the Jewish identity and gender roles. Listeners may know that I'm not really much of an Allen fan. I have found most of his work to be often rambling, self-indulgent, and pretentious, and honestly just kind of boring. However, that's more true of his more recent work. I actually like Woody Allen when he is on screen and directly involved in his films, basically playing himself. This seems to be something that generally works better in this period. This film works best due to his obvious channeling of his own personal experiences, creating a really genuine atmosphere. Plus, Keaton and Allen have great chemistry, which really does hold the film together. I liked most of the humor and found the subject matter intriguing. Still, I do think it meanders a bit, and something does seem to be missing from the ending, seeming to leave the viewer as befuddled as Arlie. Then again, maybe that's the point. I actually leave it with an A-.
Interesting. Justin?
Age can do a great deal to a critic's take on a movie, and that's primarily the case I've found with Annie Hall. At the time, I loved the chemistry and Allen's own brand of self-loathing humor, but felt it got a bit repetitive over the duration of the film. Upon a repeat viewing, I still stand on the repetitive side of things, but it definitely has its merits as a more complicated film than I would have ever thought of it originally. Out of all the Allen films I've seen, I think this one's by far the most heavy-handed in terms of personal commentary, which at times is poignant and at other times fairly pompous. That said, it definitely has some of the best chemistry I've ever seen in a romantic comedy, and reminds me that Keaton can actually sing despite the atrocious performance in And So It Goes. And the final points I honestly thought do really ring true. So for that, I'm probably being generous here, but I'll give it a B+.
Wow. You find that generous?
A little bit. Some of the tacked-on commentary got on my nerves a little bit, but
I'm kind of with you here, Justin, to be honest. I mean, I know this is supposedly Allen's masterpiece, at the very least his most well-known. I can see how for the time it might have been cutting-edge comedy, but it came out the year I was born, and I've watched a ton of 70s sitcoms, so I get the era. I just didn't think it came anywhere close to the reputation. The types of commentaries you were talking about, Joe, I mean, they were there and they were good points, but, it's nothing I couldn't see in a typical episode of Maude. But for one thing, I thought Alan's directing was all over the place. Between breaking the fourth wall, animated vignettes, and lines taken straight from his stand-up routines, he's trying so many different styles here that it becomes a bit jarring. I do agree that the chemistry between the two is great, and it does play like a real relationship, but Diane Keaton's character is so annoying. You toss her a compliment. Oh, really? Oh, do you think? It's like, oh, God.
Well, there are people like that.
And it's not that it doesn't ring true. It's just, it's a little hard to get behind a romance movie where the girl is very annoying. You can ask Katherine Heigl about that.
Whatever do you mean?
I don't know. I actually thought she was kind of likable, but go on.
As it went on, maybe a little bit as the romance blossomed.
Well, it was kind of supposed to be cute. They both had their problems, and they were bouncing off each other.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. It had funny moments, and it is, like I said, very believable. And Alan does take some risks here in turning the typical romance on its ear, but I'm with Justin. I give it a B+.
It's not that bad.
No, but I mean, if you look at like every top 100 movie list of all time, it's on there.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can agree with that.
I don't know. I have to agree. I think his directing style is a bit all over the place, but I actually think I know one reason it's probably so recognized is because of that. I think because he does try so many things. I mean, the kind of lack of linear storytelling, all the fourth wall, a lot of the commentary for the time. I think it probably hit a lot of the right notes for the time. So right. I think it's worthy of, some of the recognition. Should it have won all these awards? I don't know, but I do think it's worthy of recognizing them. I'm not sure if it's the best of Alan's work, but I definitely see that it's kind of definitive for him.
It has its place. I mean, nothing can be worse than To Rome with Love, but
To Rome with Love is his worst.
As I said, I think that when Alan's really kind of in his depth and like the height of his career, I think this is kind of around the time he peaked in the 70s.
I would say,
so.
Yeah.
I actually find this type of comedy and even drama kind of refreshing from him because I think a lot of it is smart, and I just feel like he's kind of sort of been playing the same fiddle for decades. And that's
true.
That's why I kind of have a bit of an issue with him because he's gotten so predictable and a lot of his work has kind of lost its punch. So plus he also never stops. He never takes a break.
Right.
So
one a year every year like clockwork.
His filmography is impressive in that sense, I guess. But I don't know. I just think it's if you're a Woody Allen fan, I think I can understand it. It definitely has its place.
Looking back at some of his other earlier work, like Justin showed us Sleeper, I thought that Sleeper was more of a cutting-edge comedy than this was a cutting-edge romance, I guess.
That's probably true. I think with... the thing is, from what I
Another Diane Keaton performance also.
Yep.
Another actually really good Diane Keaton performance. But I think one of the reasons why Annie Hall, I believe I read something about this, Annie Hall is considered to be more of a definitive branch off from him. It's kind of the first time he was really accepted into the mainstream.
Okay.
And a lot of his previous comedies, according to Alan, were mostly farce and things like that.
I can see that.
This is the first time he actually tried to take a story and actually do it semi-conventionally,
real world setting,
and actually have some real dramatic components. His characters had more weight and gravitas, so it actually got more recognition for that. And the film, I think, does actually seem to be right in the niche with the 70s counterculture, a lot of the movements. And so, yeah, I do think for the time, I do think it fits. Like I said, does it all hold up? Do all the stylistic things hold up? No. All the commentary seem as riveting today? No. But for the time, yeah, I'd say it was...
I can appreciate that stance on it.
I think it deserves its place. Yeah, I think it deserves the recognition. But like I said, I'm still working on my Allen, so...
That's true.
We could...
Aren't we all, really?
We could find some good and some bad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I thought most recent one did wasn't too bad, so...
Yeah, the Magic in the Moonlight.
Yeah.
That's true.
One of his better of recent years.
He's still got it. I kind of wish he'd slow down and kind of break free from that, because I feel like maybe one reason why Annie Hall's been kind of lobbied against by some people is because it's kind of what he's been sticking with since
then. Right. Yeah, basically.
I'd like
him to, you're right.
Like, really, just break away, like I said. Do some sci-fi or horror. Do something different.
Yeah.
Something different.
And you're right, too, about this movie specifically. It ends very abruptly. Just as I was sort of getting to like Keaton's character, roll credits.
Yeah, I thought the movie was a little short, actually.
I could have easily used another 15, 20 minutes tacked on at the end.
I don't know. That was kind of a early Allen staple. I think the longest I can remember was probably bananas, which was like a little over 90 minutes, give or take.
Wow.
Yeah.
Get in, get out.
Well, some of them I do want to get out of. Not going to lie.
Well, no.
All right, well, on that note, we will wrap it for this week. Next week, we have a very interesting show for you with not a lot of big nationwide releases coming out. We're going to take a look back at some of our personal favorite movies of the year that we have not discussed yet on the show. Stuff that has sort of fallen through the cracks, maybe not had a nationwide release. So that will be an interesting show. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, go ahead and do that. And you can hit us up on Facebook at Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. And both places you can find our 5-word reviews as well, just a day or two before that week's new episode goes up. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!